Hello and welcome. I'm your teacher, Gagan Singh, and I'll be teaching you biology. And once again, congratulations for your 10th result. The unit that we are going to start today talks about the living organisms, the biodiversity of the living world. And we'll be learning about what is living, what is non-living, and slowly we will move further and deeper into the world of biology and science. I hope that you will like every lesson, and I want you to study hard and become a very intelligent person in the field of biology. All the best. Good day. Diversity of living organisms. It talks about all the living organisms that are in this world, on this earth, living on earth or in water or anywhere. And your chapter number 1 is the diversity, which deals with between what is living and non-living. According to the syllabus, as it has been reduced by the council, in this syllabus you're only asked to learn what is living and characteristics of living organisms. As you can see in your chapter, in introductions, there are so many things that are given. Like there are about more than 5 lakh species of plants and over 1 million species of animals. So when we look in the nature and when we see ourselves, how our system works and how everything else that is living thrives. So people started to wonder and people started to look around the science of life and how everything is going on. And those people are called as biologists. And how do they study? Is by dividing them into kingdom classification that we will be learning in next chapter. Basically, in the beginning, we only used to know what is a plant or animal. But later on, they were classified into 5 kingdoms: Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, Animalia. And the study of all these things comes in biology. And there are different studies which are related, like algae. People who study, or the study of algae is known as phycology, and study of reptiles is known as herpetology, and so on. But we are only asked to learn the relationship between a living and living or non-living organism. According to your book, according to the explanation, it is said that a living organism is primarily physiochemical material that demonstrates a high degree of complexity and is capable of self-regulation, possesses a metabolism, and perpetuates itself through time. Which means that a living organism is basically made up of chemicals and other materials, which makes up a complex organism. And that living organism, it perpetuates over time. It means that it lives, it thrives, and regulates its internal environment. And how do we differentiate between a non-living and a living organism? Is because living organisms, they show variety of attributes, and these attributes are nutrition, metabolism, respiration, irritability, movement, growth, adaptation, reproduction, and so on. Number 1 is nutrition, because every living organism requires nutrition, and we know that there are 2 types of these living organisms: who make their own food and who does not. Autotrophs, like green plants, are known as the organisms that make their own food, and heterotrophs which do not make their own food and they actually are dependent on others. Metabolisms is just all the reactions that is happening inside the living organism. So these chemical reactions are known as metabolic reactions. And how do they happen? Is by receiving or gaining energy, or by breaking or making molecules. Some small molecules can be used to make, and there are two varieties of metabolism. One is catabolic activity, other is anabolic activity. Now comes to respiration. Respiration is actually a process which requires energy to break down food or make food. So respiration is something which is giving you energy, and it is the energy released and stored in molecules are in the form of ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate. Next topic is irritability. It basically deals with the stimuli of the body when you touch something, or when you feel the air, or whenever you are in an environment where it influences you. So all these characteristic changes or stimulus in our body comprise of irritability. Next, movement. A living organism moves and it grows and it adapts according to the environment. So it moves from one place to the other, and it grows from a smaller individual single cell to a complex body. And adaptation is our characteristics when we adapt to a certain environment. Reproduction is the final and most important attribute of a living organism, because when we are living, we also need to live endlessly. So we have two choices: either to be a mortal being, or to be a mortal but we reproduce. So as we grow, we learn things, we adapt, and then we pass on that same information to our future progeny, and that is brought by reproduction, which is can be classified both sexual and asexual. Asexual is a form where only one person can reproduce. Like in plants, you can take one leaf or a stem and you can reproduce a new individual. But sexual organisms require a male and a female. And when we see the difference between living beings and non-living beings, so whether they can be unicellular or multicellular, they possess a certain degree of organization, and that organizations can be several organs that are in our body. So that comes to a organ system, and at each organismic level we either receive or expel energy. So when we are talking about an individual, we have a full organ system, and we know that Earth's living organisms, they interact with their physical environment, and according to the environment they can be considered as a very giant or vast ecosystem. Like for example, mycelium, which grows underground, or you can say the common term is mushroom when we see. So they grow underground, they are a single colony, they are a single organism, but they can grow up to miles and miles. There are variety of fungus, algae, there are trees. In China there is a particular species that is about 300 square miles. There are so many things that make up a hierarchy of living organization, that is a living organism. So first from atoms to molecules, then organelles, then cells, then cell make up a tissue, then those tissue make up an organ, then organ system, then that whole organ system makes up an individual, and so many individuals make up a population, then community, and that community lives in an ecosystem, and that different types of ecosystem comprise of a biosphere, and in total it is known as a living biosphere or a living organism. And when we see that a living organism on a multicellular level, or which we call a living individual, it has different importance when they thrive. So the living individual, we know that life cannot be created by just putting together all the required elements, because scientists have studied so many that we have a molecular basis. We are composed of molecules such as water, carbon dioxide, and oxygen, which are in abundance in our body or in any other living organism body. And even if we take everything and we mix everything, we cannot make up a life. But according to science, we know that we can study all those things, and what a living organism is actually symbolizing when we study all those molecular basis of a living individual. Like, we cannot thrive by various micromolecules or macromolecules, and we have all those elements in our body. We are composed of over millions of, or you can say billions of cells, and each cell has so many molecules. Like importance of micromolecules, we have sugars, fatty acids, amino acids, nucleotides, and about 20 carbon atoms of organic molecules. And the same way, we also require macromolecules. Micromolecules are all those molecules that are required in a smaller quantity, and macromolecules are which are required in larger amounts of quantities in our body. They can be polysaccharides, proteins, and lipids. We know when we live daily life how our parents or doctors tell us to take protein supplement, or you should eat green leafy vegetables which contains amino acids, vitamins, and so on, because they are all important in a living system. So as I was talking about anabolism and catabolism, as you can see a equation here, the first is anabolism. It is making up of energy. So we know that plants, what they do, they take carbon dioxide and water, and in the presence of sunlight they utilize chlorophyll to make up a molecule of glucose and oxygen that we get, and we can eat that same plant and we get energy. And how do we get that? When we consume glucose, then through respiration we utilize oxygen to make up or break it into energy, which is known as catabolism. When we talk about life, life itself is an expression of energy, and it changes over time, and it actually is exchanging energy. So energy is the capacity to do work according to physics, and whenever we do something, we require energy to complete that task. So this is why whatever smaller, minute, tiny chemical reactions that are happening inside a body, they are all expression of energy. We can call it a open system or a steady state. So, an open system is something where the energy is continuously flowing inside. A closed system or a steady system is where the input of energy and matter is balanced. So in our body also there are so many chemical reactions that are comprising of to make up homeostasis. Homeostasis is defined as the overall balance in our body, because we are exchanging and giving out energy. So whenever we have a high energy or a loss, so we lose energy, we also do many metabolic activities in our body to make up for that energy, which is in terms of the work done. And lastly, biodiversity. So biodiversity is basically all the living organisms that are related to each other, and they comprise and live together, make up a biodiversity. It is the sum total of species, or you can say the species richness, all the living organisms, that is the number of species of plants, animals and microorganisms inhabiting in a given habitat. And it can be divided into 3 types, which is number 1 is genetic, number 2 is species, and number 3 is ecosystem. Genetics is the overall genetic component of the living system, and then we have species, which all the species living in a system, and the ecosystem diversity, which talks about all the living component of a system. There we have types of diversity. So diversity, we know that we are not all the same, but we are different. So it occurs at a molecular level. The genetic diversity occurs at a molecular level, and in India itself we have more than 50,000 genetically different strains of rice alone. So just imagine how vast this system can be, because we are diverse from each other, but we make up a biodiversity. We know that the living system and non-living system comes together, and they are always in interaction. So that's how we all live. And I hope that we have come to the end of this chapter. You might have understood it all. The main thing about this chapter is to differentiate between a living and a non-living, how things work, and what are the attributes of living organism. I want all of you to study it and read it at your own time, so that you can get to do more fields. And in your book there are so many branches of biology that are given when you study, like anatomy, biochemistry, biogeography, biometrics, cytology, ecology, embryology, and so on. And all these things are important when we step into the world of biology. Thank you everyone, and you have a great and wonderful day.